Tax problems have long been known to plague businesses. Today, we're going to talk about tax problems and the problems they create. I'm Lisa Ellen Smith, and this is Focus on Business.
Hi, I'm Kelly Nierick, Senior Director of Products and Services. Now may be the perfect time for you to consider adding additional lines of coverage to make your employee benefit package more robust to help attract and retain talented employees. Sbam offers a full portfolio of specialty products, including our Dearborn Group Life and Disability coverage. Our life and disability program is unique for small business owners and their employees because we've negotiated exclusive rates and eligibility requirements on your behalf. The affordable premiums and simple enrollment and administration make it attractive to you, and your employees will value the features that extend beyond the basic protection of an injury, illness, or death. Features such as an advance payment of life insurance benefit to help beneficiaries cover the cost of immediate expenses such as funerals and medical bills. Assistance with legal issues, funeral planning, preparing last will and testament, counseling, and financial management. And travel resources such as medical emergency transportation, physician referrals, and prescription or eyeglass replacement. Remember, when you add Dearborn Group Life and Disability coverage, the monthly premium can be included on your Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan or Blue Care Network insurance invoice. This means a one-stop shop for all of your company's insurance needs. And you can feel secure knowing that our customer service team is just an email or phone call away to assist with claims and billing, enrollment and terminations, ordering ID cards, and much more. If you'd like to learn more, simply contact your licensed insurance agent, visit sbam.org, or give me a call at 800-362-5461.
I'd like to send a big welcome here today to Stephen Bangs and Richard Kraus, attorneys with Kraus, Bangs and Associates. We have a lot to talk about today. Thank you for joining me, gentlemen.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Welcome, Lisa. Good to be here.
Yeah, thanks. This is a really interesting subject. Businesses, you hear about tax problems plaguing businesses, but it's not something that people really talk much about. If you've had the problem, you don't really shout it out. So I think it's a really good idea to sort of talk about that with some people who know all about this business. Let's first kind of set the stage. How do tax problems make their way into businesses, Stephen?
Well, Lisa, there's two main ways. One is obviously that the business itself would have a tax problem. But one other issue we want to touch on today is when the business's employee or worker has a tax problem. And that can lead to productivity decrease, very significant productivity problems because of the distracting and destructive nature of tax problems. And that's something that affects the employer. And there's things the employer can do to help that employee. But those are the two main ways. And just to touch on a few ways that the employee tax problem can get within the business is obviously the employee has a tax problem, so it's there. But there's also more direct ways that it can become part of the employer's life. And that could be, for instance, if a wage garnishment from the IRS is received by the business, or let's say the business is doing a credit check on a actual or prospective employee, and there's tax liens there. These are all ways that all of a sudden the employer is experiencing the tax problem, either directly or through a loss of productivity for that worker.
Yeah. So how much I've never, I have an accountant, I have an office manager. How pervasive is that for actually having to deal with the garnishment and the delinquencies on behalf of the employee? Are there options for employers, or do you just have to deal with it? What do you do there?
Well, there are legal obligations the employer has, which is one thing for the businesses to know. If you do get a wage garnishment for an employee, there's legal duties imposed upon you, and you need to follow them, or there's actually laws that can put responsibility on the employer for not following them. But the more practical issue, I think, is if a garnishment is received, that in our experience is a clear indication that the tax problem is out of control, because the tax authorities do have authority to garnish under certain circumstances, but it's usually, if not almost exclusively, an indication that the taxing authority, right or wrong, does not believe that they've been communicated with in the right way by that employee. And so if you're a business owner or employer and you get a garnishment in for an employee, you can pretty much rest assured that problem's out of control. And we'd like to touch today on some of the things the employer can do, to help that employee get help, and try to get the problem resolved.
Sounds like you're saying that this is a non-communication kind of problem on the employee side, that they're simply not responding to whoever is trying to collect taxes.
Well, it could be, but it could be, and we have many people that we've helped who come in and they believe that they have done all the right things and written all the right things, made calls, but for one reason or another, the IRS has perceived that they've not done everything they're supposed to do. Or you could have a situation where the taxing authority is just being aggressive. Sometimes people may call the taxing authority and think that they've worked something out, but for instance, maybe they didn't get an agreement from that taxing authority to not levy. And so the taxing authority hangs up the phone and the employee thinks everything's fine, but then a levy comes in. And these levies really are devastating. You could have a wage garnishment that comes in and it leaves the employee $100 in their paycheck, and it actually commands the employer to pay the IRS instead of paying the employee. And you can imagine the not just the destruction that happens in the employee's life, but from the business owner's perspective, the employer, do you think that employee is going to be productive? Then you might have them, they're spending work time to deal with the IRS, or how are they going to pay their rent or their car payment because their paycheck's gone? I mean, it really is a domino effect. And it's a sign that the problem needs to be resolved. Something has to be done to put whatever communication is necessary in place so that taxing authority does not continue what they're doing.
And in the long run, I'll just add, if I can, talking about being out of control, the employer has those responsibilities to respond to, for instance, a wage garnishment. And if there's no attention paid to that, the employer actually has the potential responsibility of being held accountable for the entire delinquent tax debt, the entire debt. And if it's determined to be willful and egregious, it could actually then be added to by almost 50%. So there's an absolute inertia in the system to make sure that an employer pays attention to those type of tax delinquencies and the responsibility to respond to the garnishments. And I'll mention something else too, from the employer's point of view. When we talk about tax authorities, we're not just talking about the IRS, but we're also talking about states, and we're talking about localities. And if I want to use a particular example, I'll talk about, for instance, the city of Lansing in Michigan that still has the authority to actually issue an arrest warrant when a party has a civil tax liability. And this is something that's completely unknown amongst both taxpayers and employers. And you want to talk about maintaining a level of disruption and then hitting the third rail, so to speak, that'll do exactly that.
So they could come to your place of business and arrest you.
It has happened. Will it happen? You don't know. But the point is in the long run, when you have this type of experience from the employer's point of view, you just got to recognize that things have already fomented. They've already evolved to a point that's out of control. And as Steve mentioned, Many times taxpayers think that they've done what was necessary. Many times they believe that they've struck an arrangement that is suitable, and yet they didn't follow the proper procedure. They may have, for instance, sent letters, and just because you send a letter doesn't mean that the system puts the whole thing on hold. There's very definite steps that have to be taken in order to ensure that you don't have this third rail experience, just from the taxpayer's point of view, but as well as the employer's point of view.
Well, and I would definitely want to get there to talk about what those processes are. But first, I'm very curious as to what kinds of issues can lead to tax problems that are this just in your life, in your face. What could you have done to get there?
Well, one thing, Lisa, is a lot of the people and businesses that we've represented over the years, the vast majority are hardworking, dedicated business owners. And by and large, the tax problems often come as a result of other events that have impacted the business owner or the employee, whether it's a medical event, divorce, family upheaval, dependency issues, meaning most of the people that come to us have been doing their level best, but have had some, as we say, a supervening event in their lives. And that has caused an effect that led to tax problems. The IRS or the city or state taxing authority need to understand what the taxpayer's been going through. And that's what we do as advocates. That's what a taxpayer needs to accomplish in the long run to solve their problem. And that's because otherwise you could have a taxpayer who's been truly victimized by events that were completely outside of their control, but find themselves in this situation with some massive liability and years of penalty and interest, who was not intentionally blowing off the IRS or the state or the city. But they're lumped in with people who perhaps have been, and they're going to be treated like that unless and until they get the IRS or the state or the city to understand, what went on, and then the problem can start getting resolved. But that's so, to answer your question, most people that we experience or that I experience wind up from their life got out of control in some way. Now, there's also other folks that have more severe problems, maybe a different attitude about taxes, that we also have helped out. But by and large, it's people they're looking to be good citizens and get back on track and keep their business going and keep their employees employed.
Are there more common industries or like 1099s or that would experience this kind of thing?
I think it's safe to say that there are, and that when you say 1099, for anyone who doesn't, know the details of that, that means that you're self-employed, that you're considered an independent contractor, which means that you are responsible to send in your tax payments instead of having them withheld from a paycheck. So I would say, yes, the IRS is going to pay closer attention to those people, because there's not a third-party employer who's just sending the tax money to the IRS. And so that would include, we've represented many, probably hundreds of truckers over the years, people in the trades, subcontractors, masons, drywallers, name any, profession in the construction trades. We represent those folks all the time, and they are, whether you want to call it targeted or picked on, it's a reality. And in our experience, majority of problems are in that category.
Yeah, if I could just add to that too, when there's economic distress, there's an inertia again in the system that causes some employers to want to change their W-2 cadre of employees into 1099 people. Now, there's a method to do that, but it's also very common where the employer that tries to do that actually violates that method and causes more trouble, not just for itself, but also for the employee. But even when it's done properly, from the employer's point of view, the jolt that an employee experiences from going from a W-2 person to a 1099 person is extraordinary. The dates by which filings have to be made, the dates by which payments have to be made are all foreign and its first experience. And if you miss the dates, you know, the way that the computer operates, there's penalties. So there's an initial learning curve that is not just something that can be easily worked into and learned as time goes on. It's an abrupt learning experience, and you have to hit it now. Moreover, you know, an employee has the right to expect the employer to contribute the employer's share to Social Security and Medicare, and yet when you become a 1099 person, you have to pay the full load of both of those contributions. So you're not just responsible to pay what you used to pay with regard to withholdings for those purposes, but you end up having more of a financial responsibility. And many people, you know, I'll just say one more thing about that, because we're talking about these particular burdens that actually are part of financial distress environments. And the burden of becoming a 1099 person is not just a technical one. It's actually one where you find as a 1099 individual that you're actually operating your own business. And that's actually the opposite side of the coin from being a W-2 person psychologically. And that's the major the hurdle for folks.
Yeah, and the whole world is kind of going that way. The whole gig economy, 20 somethings that are working project-based kind of careers. And that's a whole other show, I think. But I do want to get into the part of kind of those cardinal rules to follow once a tax problem has been identified in the business. Let's address that.
Sure. And you know, the first thing to know is that tax problems can be resolved. I mean, so many people who come to us believe that there's nothing they can do. The tax situation is a total mystery to them. Every taxpayer has rights. Every taxpayer has the right to be heard. Every taxpayer has the right to present to the IRS or other taxing authority their position. There are laws that force the IRS and the other taxing authorities to pay attention to circumstances like disruption, medical problems, other supervening events in their lives. No one should be levied or living under a levy as long as they have a mechanism to put proper communication in place. If you're living under a levy.
I'm sorry, can you define levy? Because that in our pre-show communications, that's something I was a little surprised when you defined that for me.
A levy, it's a garnishment. It's an order basically from the IRS that it has the authority to issue to an employer that commands that employer to pay the IRS the very money that would go to the employee in their paycheck. It's a very powerful tool. And by the way, it's only one that can be exercised after the IRS gives what's called due process rights. And there's rights to hearings, which is one other topic real quick. One other cardinal rule is open those notices. Do not let them sit at the post office. Many of those notices have very important rights that you need to exercise. And some of those rights can keep the IRS from levying. And so there is always hope. It is never too late to solve a tax problem. If you're in an installment agreement that makes no sense for you, if you owe $50,000 and you're paying $200 a month, you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. There is always a way to get there. And that's what we love doing every day.
And I'll mention also that the term taxpayer is one that includes not just the individual, but also the business. And businesses commonly have employment tax problems, especially in changing economic situations. And the same rights that apply to an individual that the law grants in order to resolve any kind of tax dispute are also available to the employer. And if the employer follows what it is that's been provided as the path to work through that, there's going to probably be, a resolution that's acceptable and which does not fatally or substantially disrupt business activities. But if those rights are not exercised, you end up in a situation as an employer, business person that really you find yourself behind the eight ball. There's ways to work out of that, but quite frankly, from our experience, it's demonstrated that businesses just don't understand what those ways are. And
I'm going to have to wrap it up, but thank you so much. I think there's probably information on Kraus, Bangs and Associates website. So please go there if you're interested in more information about this. And thank you, gentlemen, for being on the show today.
If you're a small business owner, I'm almost certain that you are experiencing some level of pain point with recruiting employees and even retaining them. Aside from just having a simply competitive marketplace period, what's happening now, most particularly in white-collar industries, is that employers are actually competing against the concept of entrepreneurship, where their staff are seeing that entrepreneurship is more available than ever before, and they're leaving to go hang their own shingle. I'm seeing this in mental health practices, law firms, cannabis dispensaries, and all different types of industries. And as an entrepreneur, you know how appealing entrepreneurship can be, right? So a focus for this year is going to be creating and delivering an employment experience that is more appealing than entrepreneurship. It's not so easy, or at least the grass is kind of always greener, right? So a couple of market updates to help you realize how your benefits package is positioned against others in the marketplace. Whereas 2 years ago, it was really normal to have a small business either not pay for medical insurance at all or contribute only 50% of a medical insurance premium for their employees. Now I'm seeing my clients ratchet up their contributions to 70, 80, even 90%, and some of them are beginning to include paying for dependents care as well. Additionally, we're having employers who are asking questions about kind of more creative ways to fund things. So for some, self-funding benefits like dental insurance makes a lot of sense. There are groups I'm working with who simply can't afford to pay for major medical insurance, but they are able to pay for dental, vision, disability, and life insurance. And so they can bring my team in and we can help enroll individuals in medical insurance that they own and they pay for. And there's ways to do this so that everybody kind of wins. So if you're trying to be competitive to retain talent, remember that your job is to make employment with you more appealing than entrepreneurship, and we'd be happy to help you do that.
Focus on Insurance, brought to you by Cedar River Insurance.
Thank you so much for watching our program. You know, we have an objective, and it's just simply to help businesses and, of course, employees, individual folks, to understand this topic of tax delinquency and what rights you particularly have. And when I say you, again, that includes employers. We are in a period of significant economic upheaval, and that upheaval stresses everybody at every level. And when these tax problems do exist and impact on a person's life or business activities, you need to keep in mind that there are many rights that are available to each of you, and those rights need to be exercised within the time periods that the law actually permits. If you don't, they're considered waived. This is not an easy topic. It's not something that's regularly discussed amongst business people, whether in business meetings or with employees or even amongst employees. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But our effort throughout has been dedicated to try to provide as a public service this information, which, by the way, needs to be understood in your frame of reference and not in a technical frame of reference. And the technical frame of reference is obviously available online. You get all the publications, you try to work your way through all that technicality, and you still don't know what is really required or available to you. So look again, watch the program again if you have any questions or any kind of strife of this kind. And of course, you're welcome to call us and you're welcome to talk to us. And we'll respond and we'll tell you what we think you need to do if we were you with your problem. I'm attorney Richard Craig Krause, and I want to thank you again.
Focus on Tax, brought to you by Krause, Bangs, and Associates PC.
This is Denise Policello with Focus on Legal. If the pandemic taught us anything at all, it's that emergencies will happen. But they're so difficult to predict, of course. So what can you do from a legal perspective to make sure that if an emergency happens, it will have the least impact possible on your business? Well, first thing you should be doing is making sure that all of your contracts, vendor agreements, leases, service agreements, employment agreements are reviewed by a competent contractual or business attorney, preferably before they're signed, but in any event, at least an annual review to make sure that you're aware of your risk and what's in them. You want to review the force majeure provisions. Those are the provisions in contracts that suspend performance in the event of a particular emergency. And then also make sure that those contracts work for you and are flexible and give you options in the event of an emergency that may be more impactful for your industry or your type of company. Second thing you need to do is remember that sometimes the emergency is yours personally, and that if your world stops for a minute, your companies cannot. So you need to do some proactive business planning with a business attorney to make sure that you have company documents in place that allow the management and authorization of payments and management of the company in your absence. So you want to put a couple of key employees in place. You have those authorizations in place so your company has continuity of business. And then the third thing you need to do, of course, is get that emergency management plan in place and practice it once or twice a year with key employees. Make sure that they are ready to go. You'll notice a theme here of prevention, and notice that attorneys are not only more effective, but actually less expensive when they are used proactively. And if you're looking for somewhere to start as far as what to do to write an emergency management plan, go to the Sbam website. It's a fantastic resource.
Focus on Law, brought to you by Pochella and Associates, PLLC.
The executive producers of Focus on Business are looking for your stories. Stories from owners of established businesses that have come through amazing adversity, bucked the odds, found the next big thing. If you have a story, we want to hear from you. Go to our website and maybe we'll invite you onto the show.